Thank you for being here, both in person and on the cloud, all of you. It's a special day for me today. I grew up in the Catholic tradition, and today is my name day, which means we celebrated more the name of the saint after you were called than the actual birthday. And so today would be Saint Dorothy or Dorothea in German, and that means divine gift. And I think all of us are those gifts. And if we realize that, and if we live that, then I think we will find more joy and peace and gratitude in our lives and become gifts to others. So these traditions are very meaningful, but often we forget their meaning. Today in my talk, I would like to take up another experience of someone I have spoken about in my December talk as well. His name is Father Shigeto Oshida, and he was the founder of the Takamori heritage in the north of Japan. He died in 2003 at the age of 81 years old. But I want to take his experience as a launching point for my koan today, namely case 46 of the Hekigan Woku, or the Blue Cliff Record, entitled Kyôsei's Voice of Raindrops. Kyôsei's Voice of Raindrops. But why do I like to come back to Father Oshida? So, like so many countless pilgrims of all traditions who came to stay at that heritage, at that pilgrimage place in the north of Japan, I see him as a bridge between the West and the East, or between the Zen Buddhist and the Judeo-Christian tradition. But it doesn't really matter at all where exactly our starting point is, whether you come from one side or the other, or no side at all, because our starting point is always right here, right now. And that bridge, where does it lead us to? It really leads you straightly to your true self, your own true self, which is completely beyond this tradition or that. And yet it helps to have these traditions to point out the way. So Shigeto grew up in a Soto household, and he was a practitioner of meditation. And in 1943, before he was drafted into the Japanese army, he had a deep encounter with a Dominican priest. And he decided on the spot to become a Dominican himself. And in 1946, he almost died in a drowning accident. And after that, came close to death several times because he had a lung infection, which was chronic. And so living on that brink of mortality is also one powerful way in which we can be opened up to that world of our true nature, that world that I spoke about of pure giftedness, moment after moment. But first, here is the experience which is described. There is a book about him by Lucien Miller, and the book, interestingly, is entitled Jesus in the Hands of Buddha. So it happened during Father Oshida's novitiate in a Dominican monastery in Sendai, at a time when he still did not feel quite at ease in the monastery. And he also had to be back to the hospital many times because of his illness. But in the last 2 years of his novitiate, so that lasted until 1958, his master of novices was somebody called Father Bernard Tart. And he was a mystic and a very unconventional teacher with also very refreshing views. So, for example, he told his friars that they should go beyond this inflexibility, which is caused by the dependence on the letter of the law. And he said, if you keep the rules, you are kept, you are protected. But that's not all. You should not criticize those who do not keep the rules. There are times that the rules must be broken. That is when you need love. Love supersedes everything. And as an aside, we are now in a homeowner association, and there had been big tensions between the members of our association, where some insist on keeping the rules, every rule, while the others have opted for more flexibility and creativity. So these kinds of tensions that Father Tart mentioned, of course, they are found in every kind of context. They are not limited to some monastics in a Christian or Buddhist monastery. So one of the rules to be observed was the great silence every night. And one night the friars were very surprised because there was this distinctive breeding call of the Japanese bush warbler reverberating through the darkness. And so during the daytime, that kind of call is announcing the coming of spring throughout Japan. But it's never heard at night, and it wasn't even close to spring. And so very astonished, the friars woke up and they opened their windows and they went out on the balcony to listen. It was something like, ho, ho, kakyo, ho, ho, kakyo. And it went on for some time. And at last, Father Oshida saw a ghostly figure walking through the garden. And that was Father Tart. He was sounding this haunting refrain on a bird whistle. But the effect on Oshida was very profound. He wrote that this kind of unusual experience, the bird call in the night, instantly opened him up to the world of kotohogi, which is a Shinto term which means the world of the sacred. So if you wonder about Shinto, if you are in a Japanese monastery in Japan, so the Shinto, the traditional religion of Japan, or the tradition of Japan, and the Buddhist tradition are very deeply intermeshed in Japan. If you go and enter a monastery, you will always see a little Shinto shrine somewhere at the entrance. And so this is why Father Oshida thought of this Shinto term, kotohogi, the world of the sacred. The world of the sacred and the celebration of the sacred. And this call of the bird made that world completely palpable to him. And it helped him to feel at peace where he was in a monastery, to drop all of his anxieties and worries about whether he was in the right place. And later he commented on that opening experience and said, "When I hear a bird song, I hear the hereafter. I feel the hereafter. I hear the deepest voice of God, not mingled with my own voice or the voice of society." So this ho, ho, kakyo. Do we ourselves experience the voice, the song, the call of a bird as praise or celebration of the sacred? Or do we feel that hereafter, which means, of course, it's that world that is completely beyond time and space? So does that bird song really make that world palpable to us? This world of kotohogi, the sacred, of course refers to that dimension of our own being, which is emptiness. It is empty, transparent. It is the one that Buddha Shakyamuni experienced in the light of the morning star. And that world is also called the world of our original face, or the world of the unborn, the unconditioned, of not a single thing. Hu, hu, kakyo. Full manifestation of this world of not a thing. Or gong, gong, gong. That ringing of our gong of a temple bell. It's also a full elevation of that world. So let yourself completely melt away in that sound, in that vast universe of silence. But now let's come to the koan. Here's the case. Kyôsei asked the monk, "What is that sound outside the gate?" The monk said, the sound of raindrops. Kyôsei said, living beings turned upside down are deluded to themselves and pursue objects. The monk said, how is it for you, master? Kyôsei said, I almost became deluded to myself. The monk asked, what does it mean to say, I almost became deluded to myself? Kyôsei said, although it should be easy to become one, to leave oneness can be said to be difficult. So this Kyôsei, or Jingqing in Chinese, lived in the 9th and 10th centuries. He was a disciple of Seppo, and Valerie spoke about Seppo's snake last week. And Kyôsei also appears in Koan number 16 of the Hekigan record, the Blue Cliff record, where, that's beautiful, he compares the task of the teacher to the mother hen who is picking the egg from the outside, and the chick is picking inside to come out. And so that, I think, is a really nice image to keep in mind when we look at this koan and the interaction between Kyôsei and the monk. And of course, the image also applies to this Father Tat about whom I just talked, who really wanted to help those seminarians to break through the limitations of the words and letters of the law and the rules. So to open them up to that world of the sacred, you could say that world of wonder, that world that really transcends all discursive thinking, and that fully reveals itself in the sound of a bird during that great silence of the night. But in this koan, we are not talking about the sound of the bird, but it's the sound of raindrops. And that is what Kyôsei is asking the monk about. But it's not an innocent question, but a question to check the mind of the student, to check his degree of realization. So Kyôsei is asking, what is the sound outside of the gate? Well, do you know the trap? Do you notice it in this question? So when it rains, does it rain only outside of the gate? So as Valerie mentioned, next week I'll be leaving for this month-long retreat in Taiwan, in our monastery, which is located high on the mountains overlooking the Pacific East Coast. And when we are on retreat, it often rains from morning to night. And then from 9 again, night to mornings throughout the night. And sometimes it rains for 2 weeks straight. And even though, of course, our monastery also has a big entrance gate, the rain definitely doesn't stop there. So it starts by tapping on the leaves of the trees and bushes around the zendo, and then it's drumming on the roofs, it's splashing on the terraces, it's forming gurgling streams that rush down the gutters and then find their way down the mountain. And if you sit in a sound of rain like this for hours and days, really that ordinary distinction between inside and outside just gets washed away. And so the distinction between the one who hears and what is heard also completely vanishes. It's just pitter, patter, drumming, splashing, gurgling. Every sound is what? Sacred ground. And our practice is to listen to that deep silence of the universe, to deeply enter into that silence, our depths, returning to that depth, returning to silence. And it's not to make any mental distinction between sound and silence, inside and outside, while the whole universe really is dancing in that sound of the rain, shaking up the zendo. And at the same time, that whole universe has never even once left that deep and sacred silence that pervades everything. That is one and the same fact. So, what is that sound outside of the gate? Or what is that sound outside of the gate? Or what is that sound outside of the gate? Or what is that sound outside of the gate? How would you answer that? So the monk answers correctly. He says, it's the sound of raindrops. He has walked straight into Kyôsei's trap, not realizing that Kyôsei is checking his state of mind. Or I think really more than checking the monk's state of mind, Kyôsei probably wants to help him to realize just the fact, the sound of raindrops. Just that full revelation of that world of zero. Nothing there. But the monk's answer, of course, is purely descriptive. It remains on that level where things are simply inside or outside, where the subject, the monk is inside and the vein is outside of the gate. So Kyôsei reacts really kindly without criticizing the monk directly. He says, living beings turned upside down are deluded to themselves and pursue objects. And so here Kyôsei is referring to the human condition, which the Buddha explained in the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering or dissatisfaction because human beings being deluded, meaning us being deluded, meaning that we don't truly know who or what we are. So we don't know our own sacred ground. We don't know our own nature, which is unborn, without any limits, clear, luminous. And also we have no idea about the fact that there is originally not anything lacking in us at all. And so out of this basic ignorance about our true nature, which is the true nature of every single thing in this universe, we live out of this constant feeling of lack. We don't see abundance. And this is why we are turned upside down. Out of that feeling of lack, out of that ignorance, then we pursue objects outside of us, thinking that perhaps they will make us feel more worthy, more real, more satisfied, more secure. And of course we all know that the advertisement industry is based on this feeling of lack, trying to convince us that true happiness lies in consumption. Whether it's owning designer handbag or a certain brand of shoes or a fancy car or McMansion, it would not serve our consumers' economy if true happiness is something that you attain by simply listening to the vein. Because anyone could do that, right? But these objects and these price tags that are attached to them, or the lifestyle that's attached to them, is something that distinguishes us from others. And so that greed then is part of the upside down condition of us humans. And the other aspect is the frustration or the anger when these things of our desire prove to be unreachable, or when we are able to reach them, they prove to be impermanent and they don't really make us as happy as we had imagined. But really, tell me, how could this infinite dimension of our true being ever be satisfied by things, by pursuing things? And so again, Kyôsei says, living beings turned upside down are deluded to themselves and pursue objects. And here I really do love the monk's very earnest, intimate response. And he says, how is it for you, Master? And Kyôsei admits honestly, I almost became deluded to myself. But that fact, I almost became deluded to myself, is not so surprising, or is it? So when we recite our 4 Bodhisattva vows, we say, delusions are innumerable. I vow to end them. So how do we end all of those delusions? I think, the answer is, of course, our practice, which opens us up. Opens us up for what? So I would say it really opens us up for a transformative experience, an opening of the heart and the mind that shows us the world free from all of those filters of the I, me, mine. And at such a moment, we are no longer separate, no longer deluded, but experience things just as they are. And that is truly a great joy. So to give you an example, there was one of our members at the Sophia Zen Center in South Bend who had such an experience not so long before he unfortunately and sadly passed away from a heart attack. And at that time when it happened, he was really in a very difficult situation. He had just undergone a painful divorce and he was trying to take care of his young daughter. But when he reported this experience to me, which happened during a retreat, he was really shedding tears of joy and gratitude. So he had been sitting outside during a break, just listening to the humming of the bees, collecting nectar from a bush full of blooms. And as he was simply present and listening, his problems somehow disappeared. And that upside-down person that had had all those problems, that was defined by those problems, also somehow vanished. The humming of the bees had really revealed to him this world of grace and beauty, a world free from hindrances for him at that moment, the world of Mu, in which he found himself at home and at peace. And that being at peace with such an experience is really important. So he experienced that sacred ground. But the monk beautifully keeps persisting in his earnest questioning. He said, "What does it mean I almost became deluded to myself?" And Kyôsei answers, although it should be easy to become one, to leave oneness can be said to be difficult. So what Kyôsei is saying here, that this experience of becoming one, this experience in which our ego drops away, and the sacred ground, that world of zero in which all things are one, reveals itself. That experience, he says, is not so difficult to attain. He says the truly difficult thing is not to be attached to that experience and then to simply come back to the ordinary world. Even when Buddha Shakyamuni realized this world of oneness, not in the sound of the raindrops or the humming of the birds, but in the light of the morning star, he needed to be reminded by the god Indra to get up from his seat and go back to the world. Well, go back to the world to do what exactly? Well, to go back to the world to share his own realization of his true nature with others, to help them to become free as well. So if leaving oneness, as Kyôsei says, can be said to be difficult, then being turned upside down actually refers to a state of being stuck in oneness, in emptiness. And this being stuck in emptiness is referred to as a Zen sickness, something that neither helps yourself nor others. Now there is a famous quote in Chinese Buddhism, but I saw it was attributed to Dogen, so I'm not so sure, but it says, Before one studies Zen, mountains are mountains and waters are waters. After a first glimpse into the truth of Zen, mountains are no longer mountains and waters are no longer waters. Then after enlightenment, mountains are once again mountains and waters once again waters. So this step to come back from the realization of this world of zero or world of mu, of emptiness, to the ordinary world, where mountains are again mountains, where people are again people, that can be difficult. And you all know this, but unfortunately, there are examples of Zen teachers in the West who have really exploited this state of oneness, the power it conferred on them in the eyes of their students to take advantage of them in so many ways. So these teachers really were completely turned upside down and they harmed their students. But rather than that, let us take the example of the Bodhisattva of great compassion, Bodhisattva Guanyin, a canon in Japanese, and Guanyin, I think most of you know, means to listen or to perceive the sounds, and Guanxin, to perceive the sounds of the world. And according to the Shurangama Sutra, Guanyin, this Bodhisattva of great compassion, attained realization by listening to the sound of water, not the sound of raindrops, but the sound of the ocean waves splashing on the rocks and receding back into silence again. And so our practice is also about deeply entering into that silence of mu, and forget ourselves in doing so. That means, in other words, we learn to let go of these deeply ingrained notions. They are deeply ingrained and habitual. These notions about self and others, inside and outside, our preferences, our aversions. And unfortunately, we only need to look around to see how many of our families, our society, our political establishment, our country, our world is plagued by these upside-down notions and all of those passions that they generate. Instead, from that sacred ground of your own heart and mind, from that silent place that's always at rest, let that power of Guanyin's boundless love and compassion come forth and embrace the suffering of the world. That is our practice. I found a beautiful sentence by a woman called Marina Wiederkehr. I think she is a nun in Arkansas. I'm not sure if she's still alive, but she says, "Learn to be silent. Silent as the leaves that fall. Silent as the blossoming flowers. Silent as the moment before dawn." And since I started with Father Oshida, I also went to end my talk with his haiku. It goes as follows. Falling leaves voice. Listen, the unborn sphere. Falling leaves voice. Listen, the unborn sphere. Thank you.